Home Assistant 2026.9 is almost here, and this month we've got a much better way to work out why something happened in your smart home, a new Matter network map, improvements to the security dashboard, and several new places to keep an eye on the hardware connected to your system. So come with me as I take you through what's changed and everything you need to know before you go ahead and upgrade. Hey everyone, my name's Simon and welcome to Byte of Geek, a channel that's all about Home Assistant and smart home technology. So here we are then with the 2026.9 version of Home Assistant just about to be released, and this is another one of those updates where there isn't necessarily one enormous headline feature, but there are lots of changes that make Home Assistant more useful in day-to-day use. We've got improvements to history and activity, more work on the built-in security dashboard, some genuinely useful diagnostic tools for Matter, serial devices and network storage, plus a long list of integrations and smaller changes. I mention this in every update video, but it's worth noting again that this is a beta release of Home Assistant, and as such it can be subject to change before the final release, with features potentially dropped, changed or added at the last minute. I'll put a link to the release notes in the description of this video if you want to read about the update in more detail. But let's kick things off then and look at what's in store for the September release of Home Assistant. Starting with Home Assistant Cloud, and the sign-up process has been redesigned again following the wider cloud changes in last month's release. The opening page now makes it much clearer whether you want to start a free trial or sign into an existing account, and it actually shows the features included before you begin. Once you confirm your email address, you're now signed in automatically rather than being sent back to the login page, and the trial lasts for a full month and doesn't require any payment details, after which you can then set up remote access, cloud backups and the or Google Assistant connections. Obviously, Home Assistant Cloud is optional and there are other ways of handling some of those features, but this subscription directly supports Nabu Casa and the Open Home Foundation. If you've been thinking about trying it out, the setup should now be considerably more straightforward. Next, and the built-in security dashboard continues to improve this month with 2 additions that should make it much more useful. The first is a new active alert section. You choose which entities you want to monitor and whether each one should be treated as an alert or a warning. So for example, you might have a window that's been left open showing as a warning, while something like a smoke detector or water leak is treated as a much more serious alert. The important part is that the section only appears when there's actually something that needs your attention. If there's not a problem, then it just doesn't show up, rather than filling up the dashboard with another permanent panel. Alongside that, there's a new favourite section where you can pin the doors, locks and sensors you check most often. Rather than relying on wherever Home Assistant happens to place them, you can keep the important ones together at the top of the dashboard. Next, and both history and activity now use a new sources panel. This combines the selection of floors, areas, devices and entities with filters for things such as domain, device class and integration. So rather than having to select individual entities one at a time, you could choose your ground floor and then filter that down just to motion sensors, or select an area and only show the entities provided by a particular integration. On a wider screen, the panel sits down the left-hand side and opens automatically, but on a phone or a narrower display, it'll appear as a pull-up panel instead, and Home Assistant will remember the filters you used when you come back to it. There is a difference in how history and activity work, however, with history waiting for you to select something before it starts drawing charts, whilst activity continues to show everything by default, which you can then narrow down using the filters available. The bigger activity change though, and I think this is something a lot of people are going to find really helpful, is that it can now show you not just what changed, but why it changed. So at the moment, you just see that a light turned on or a door unlocked, but you never know what caused that to happen unless you go digging through automations and traces and basically start debugging things. With this release, selecting an entry in activity opens a new details window that shows the full chain of events. You can see what started it, whether that was a person, a state change, a schedule, an integration or a restart, then any automations or script it passed through, and finally the resulting change to the entity. I think this is going to be particularly useful when you have several automations that can control the same device. Rather than guessing which one turned a light on, you should now be able to follow the chain and see exactly what happened. Next, and Matter finally gets a network map inside Home Assistant, just as ZHA, Z-Wave and Bluetooth have had similar views for a while. And yes, Matter Server already had this, but you had to go into its own separate web interface to see it, and it kind of felt like it was something you weren't meant to be looking at. Now there's a Show Map button in the Matter panel, and this uses the same sort of graph view as other protocols. It shows whether devices are communicating over Thread or Wi-Fi, which devices are routers or battery-powered end devices, the border routers and access points involved, and the route between Home Assistant and each device. The names should also be easier to recognize, with border routers and access points using things such as the host name or Wi-Fi network name rather than just presenting you with a serial number. The color of a connection shows whether it's a Thread or a Wi-Fi device, while the thickness and direction provide an indication of the signal strength at each end. Given the problems many people seem to be working through with Thread devices becoming unavailable, I think this will turn out to be a really useful feature. And whilst a network map doesn't magically fix a device, it does help to be able to see which border router it's using and how the network is put together, making troubleshooting much less of a guessing game. The ever useful tile card gets 3 new features this month. Lights can now have an effect selector, allowing you to choose and preview effects such as rainbow directly from the card. Vacuums can have a fan speed selector alongside the existing start, stop and dock controls, and the target humidity feature, which was previously limited to humidifiers, can now be used with climate entities that support humidity control. All 3 also have matching card suggestions, so Home Assistant can offer to add them automatically when they're supported by an entity. And finally, for the main new features, we have some important work taking place with Modbus. Modbus has been supported in Home Assistant for a long time now, but it has generally meant configuring it in YAML and manually entering the register map for your device. That option isn't going away, but this release lays the groundwork for normal integrations that already understand a device's registers and can be set up through the UI. Home Assistant can now share that connection. Integrations using the same connection details will send their requests through a single connection and have them queued in the correct order. The connection only exists while something is using it, and the setup process can also temporarily connect to probe a device before the integration is saved. The first integrations to use this are Fronius, SoFar Inverter Modbus and Flexit. Fronius can optionally use Modbus TCP with SunSpec to expose data such as the current, voltage, power and lifetime energy for each solar tracker, including information that isn't available through its existing cloud API. For most users, the important part is that we should start seeing more Modbus devices presented as normal integrations with the register knowledge built in, rather than everybody having to recreate the same YAML configuration themselves. Next, and we have the integrations, and these really are the building blocks of Home Assistant that allow so many different devices to interact in our smart homes. Every release there's something new or something that's changed, which makes it important to keep up to date each month. So make sure to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss my next video. Starting things off then, and there's a new BESN integration for compatible EV chargers, including the BS20. It connects over Bluetooth Low Energy, either through Home Assistant's built-in Bluetooth support or an ESP Home Bluetooth proxy. If you've ever wanted to have your own picture of the day image as your dashboard background, well, there's a new collection image integration that will let you turn a folder from your media into a dynamic image entity and display a random image. Owners of a Flowit ventilation system can now control it locally in Home Assistant with fan speed control and preset modes including auto and boost, and it also supports automatic discovery. Those of you with a hot spring spa fitted with the connected Spa Kit 2 can now monitor and control it over the local network, and impressively this integration launches at platinum level on the integration quality scale. There's a new local Bluetooth integration for ISEO Argo smart locks, which are apparently a common thing found in armoured doors in Italy and Switzerland. With this integration, Home Assistant acts as a gateway for the lock and can synchronize its access log into Home Assistant logbook and provides actions for managing users. If you run Libre NMS for network monitoring, there's a new integration that currently provides an online or offline binary sensor for each monitored device. It's an initial release with alerts and more sensor information planned for the future. Nextbase EV chargers can now be added through their cloud account. At the moment it's read-only, but you get sensors for charging state, power, session energy, lifetime energy and other electrical and diagnostic information, with charging controls planned for a later release. There's also a new read-only integration for the Ridder Hortimax Pro greenhouse controller, bringing in information such as temperature, humidity, irrigation volumes, energy use and the position of vents and screens. We've got a couple of new serial integrations in this release with Samsung TV via X-Link, allowing you to control compatible televisions through their RS232 port, whether that's connected directly or through a USB to serial adapter or an ESP Home serial proxy. And we have ToneWinner, which works in a similar way for compatible AV processors, receivers and amplifiers, and both of these serial integrations launch at silver quality. For EV charging, Scylla Prism can now be monitored locally through its MQTT API with sensors for status, power, current, voltage and session and lifetime energy, and just as with NextBlue, charging controls are planned for a future release. So far, Inverter Modbus is one of the first integrations to use the shared Modbus work I mentioned earlier. It connects to compatible solar inverters over Modbus TCP, either directly or through a bridge, and automatically detects the inverter model during setup. It supports both solar-only systems and hybrid inverters with battery storage. And finally, there's a new specialized turbo integration for e-bikes, allowing you to connect the TCU1 and TCX1 through to TCX4 models. These will connect via Bluetooth and you'll get ride and battery information. Those are the new integrations in this release, but as always, there are plenty of improvements to existing ones. I'm not going to list every change in this release, but I'll pick out some of the more notable ones, starting with Shelly. And cameras are now fully supported with a camera entity, motion detection, and a privacy switch that disables the lens. Alongside this, the wall display XL also gets its own motion sensor, and there's a fix for climate entities where the thermostat relay has been wired in reverse. Reolink gets several useful additions, including start and end times for the floodlight schedule, a button to synchronize the camera clock, an anti-flicker frequency selector, and control over the tamper alarm. Roborock adds dock controls for V1 vacuums, including starting mop washing, drying and emptying, while LG WebOS televisions get a switch that turns off the screen without stopping the sound. MikroTik has had another substantial update with switches for Ethernet and Wi-Fi interfaces, a selector for PoE output mode, an interface connectivity binary sensor, and several additional sensors. OpenEVSE adds switches for diverting solar into the car, limiting the charge rate to protect the electrical supply, and manually forcing charging on or off. And Midea also receives a large update with fan, humidifier, light and switch controls, along with selectors, number entities, buttons, and a dust filter alert. That's just some of the many integrations that have been updated this month. If you want to read the full list, then check out the release notes linked in the description below. We've also got several integrations moving up the quality scale. Google Health, LED Infrared, and WIM have all reached platinum. BLE box devices moves to gold, and Uman EH800 moves to silver. There are plenty of other changes worth mentioning in this release, starting with the Sun integration, where the move towards purpose-specific automation building blocks is now complete. This release adds conditions and matching triggers for golden hour, blue hour, midnight sun, and polar night. Golden and blue hour can be limited to the morning, evening, or either, so that you can use them for things such as changing indoor lighting to match the light outside, or closing things such as your blinds and curtains before direct sunlight reaches a room. Accessibility in systems should be baked in from day one, but many fail to implement even the basics. This is something that's been a long-standing project for Home Assistant, and this release there's an impressive improvement for the charts. Until now, charts have effectively been no better than an image, in that you could never hit data points with a keyboard or even use a screen reader to give you the information. That changes with the 2026.9 release, as you can now tab into supported line and bar charts and use the arrow keys to move through the individual points. Home Assistant will then announce the time and value through a screen reader, and it plays a tone that rises and falls with the data, allowing you to hear the shape of the trend. Next, and we have a new serial panel under settings, and when anything is using a serial port such as a Zigbee or Thread dongle, then the page lists what Home Assistant can see. Ports are separated into those currently in use, those that are connected but not being used, and those that something expects to find but are currently disconnected. There's also a summary at the top, so if a USB stick has come loose or an app has lost its connection, you should be able to spot it without immediately diving into the logs. Having just done a video on backing up Home Assistant, the storage page gets a nice practical improvement. Network shares now show a usage bar and the amount of space used out of the total capacity. Each share loads independently, preventing slow or unavailable NAS devices from holding up the others, and the bar changes to amber once usage passes 85% and red once it passes 95%. There are also some nice smaller improvements as well in this release, starting with template entities gaining more flexible custom attributes, and trigger-based template entities can now have their own conditions that prevent an individual entity from updating. Button triggers can now fire from button helpers as well as physical buttons. Automation traces show the entities, devices and areas targeted by each step, and supported cover actions gain an optional speed setting. The restart confirmation window now lists the automations and scripts that are actually running and keeps the list updated as they start and stop, rather than just warning that something might be interrupted. It's great to see this being added, as I can't be the only one who found this slightly annoying when you got that message displayed. And finally, you can set a dashboard background through a new background tab in the interface rather than having to use YAML. And media browser searches can now include the libraries held by media players such as Music Assistant, Sonos, Squeezebox and Jellyfin. There are several breaking changes in this release, so we'll jump straight in with Flexic Nordic. Its deprecated fireplace mode switch has been removed, so if you use it in an automation or script, you'll need to call the climate set preset mode action on the Flexic climate entity and select fireplace instead. KNX exposes will no longer send the first value to the KNX bus when an entity becomes available. Home Assistant will adopt that initial value locally, and whilst it will still be returned by read requests and periodic updates will continue, the first value won't automatically generate a telegram. So if you relied on that behavior, then you'll need to review the affected setup. If you use custom prompts with an LLM integration, then you should note that tool names are now prefixed with the domain of the integration providing them. For example, get live context becomes Home Assistant get live context. Therefore, any custom prompts that refer to a tool by name will need to be updated. Persistent notifications now report an update type of updated when an existing notification changes, rather than reporting it as added again. If you have an automation listening for added and expecting that to include both new and changed notifications, then you should add updated to the trigger as well. Unify Protect now requires version 7.2.105 or newer, so make sure that's updated before you install Home Assistant 26.9. Its smart detection and audio alarm switches are also no longer hidden when recording is disabled, although the entity IDs and behavior remain the same. Installing, skipping or clearing a skipped update now requires an administrator account. Automations aren't affected because they run without a user context, but a script runs as the person who started it. So if a non-admin user starts a script that attempts to install or skip an update, it will now fail. The deprecated battery level property has been removed from the base vacuum entity, and all of the built-in integrations were migrated in the last release, but a custom integration that still uses the old property will no longer report a battery level and will need a separate battery sensor. And finally, the Z-Wave actions used to manage lock users and their credentials now require an administrator account. So that's it. That's what Home Assistant 2026.9 has lined up for us, and I think the improved activity details could be one of those changes that becomes invaluable the first time an automation does something unexpected. I'm also really interested to see how useful the new matter map is when diagnosing thread devices, but what's caught your attention in this release? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss more Home Assistant updates like this, as well as all the other smart home content that I create on the channel. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.